In the early 20th century, the world believed the worst was behind it. The Great War was over, and a fragile peace settled across the globe. But beneath the surface of this new era, nations were angry, broken, and hungry for power. The embers of old rivalries and fresh resentments smoldered, waiting for a wind to fan them into a new inferno. And in 1939, a single spark ignited the deadliest conflict in human history. A firestorm that would consume continents, topple empires, and scar the soul of humanity. This is the story of World War II, a war that reshaped borders, destroyed empires, and changed humanity forever. To understand World War II, we must go back to the end of World War I. The so-called war to end all wars concluded with the Treaty of Versailles. Instead of healing the world, it sowed the seeds of future conflict. The treaty punished Germany harshly, imposing crippling war debts that would take generations to repay. It stripped away vast territories, dismantled its military, and forced the nation to accept full blame for the war. This national humiliation created a deep and lasting wound. These wounds festered, creating a fertile ground for extremist leaders who promised a return to glory, a restoration of pride, and ultimately revenge. They offered simple answers to complex problems, and a weary, desperate populace listened. In Germany, a failed artist and World War I veteran named Adolf Hitler rose to power, mesmerizing crowds with his promises to restore German greatness and reclaim what was lost. In Italy, Benito Mussolini, with his dreams of a new Roman Empire, established a fascist regime built on nationalism and military might. And in the Far East, an expansionist Japanese military, driven by a desire for resources and regional dominance, began its aggressive campaign across Asia. Three distinct ideologies, three ambitious leaders, all marching their nations down a path of conquest. The world watched, often in denial, as the drumbeat of war grew louder. Unknowingly, it was marching toward disaster. The breaking point came on September 1, 1939. At dawn, Germany invaded Poland with shocking speed and overwhelming force. They unleashed a new and terrifying form of warfare, blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Panzer tanks, supported by screaming dive bombers, tore through polished defenses, while infantry poured across the border. The strategy was designed for a swift, decisive victory, avoiding the stagnant trench warfare of the previous generation. In response to the invasion, Britain and France, honoring their alliance with Poland, declared war on Germany, but their help came too late. Poland fought bravely, but it was outmatched and isolated. Within weeks, the country was crushed between the German invasion from the west and a Soviet invasion from the east. The first chapter had been written. World War II had begun. Over the next year, the German war machine seemed unstoppable. Europe collapsed under its power with breathtaking speed. Denmark and Norway fell, securing Germany's northern flank. Then, the Blitzkrieg turned west, smashing through the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. By 1940, German forces bypassed France's vaunted Maginot Line and swept into the heart of the country. The world watched in stunned disbelief as the impossible happened. Paris, the beacon of liberty and culture, fell. German soldiers marched down the Champs-Élysées, a devastating symbol of Allied defeat. But in Britain's darkest hour, as it stood alone against the Nazi tide, hope survived. Trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, over 300,000 Allied soldiers faced annihilation. In one of the most remarkable rescue missions in history, a civilian armada answered the call. Ordinary fishermen, sailors, and yachtsmen crossed the treacherous English Channel in their small boats, braving enemy fire to save the stranded army. This miracle of Dunkirk was not a victory, but it was a deliverance that preserved the core of the British Army to fight another day. Soon after, the battle moved to the skies. In the Battle of Britain, the Royal Air Force valiantly defended their homeland against the relentless German Luftwaffe. For the first time, Hitler's advance was stopped. 1941 became the year the war truly became global, spreading to new fronts and drawing in new powers. In June, Hitler made his most fateful decision. He launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history against his erstwhile ally, the Soviet Union. 3 million German soldiers surged across a front that stretched for thousands of miles, expecting a quick victory. What they found was a vast, unforgiving land and a population willing to sacrifice everything for its defense. A brutal, attritional war of extermination began on the Eastern Front, marked by unimaginable suffering and staggering casualties on both sides. And across the world, the Empire of Japan continued its aggressive expansion. Having been at war in China since 1937, it now sought to secure the resources of Southeast Asia, pushing into French Indochina and eyeing the oil-rich Dutch East Indies. The Japanese rising sun flag was hoisted over captured territories across the Pacific. The United States, though officially neutral, responded with an oil embargo, a move that Japan saw as a direct threat to its ambitions. Tensions reached a boiling point. Then came the day that would live in infamy, December 7, 1941. In a meticulously planned surprise attack, Japanese naval aircraft descended upon the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In less than 2 hours, a wave of bombers and torpedo planes crippled the American fleet, sinking battleships and devastating the naval base. The attack was a stunning tactical success for Japan, but a catastrophic strategic blunder. It awakened a sleeping giant. The world changed overnight. The next day, America declared war on Japan, and a few days later, Germany and Italy declared war on America. The conflict was now a true world war, and the balance of power was about to shift decisively. By 1942 and 1943, the relentless tide of Axis victories began to slow and then to recede. The Allies, now bolstered by the industrial might of the United States and the vast manpower of the Soviet Union, began to turn the tide in a series of monumental battles. On the Eastern Front, the Battle of Stalingrad became a symbol of ferocious resistance. In the frozen ruins of the city, Soviet soldiers fought for every house, every street, every pile of rubble. The battle devolved into a brutal, close-quarters struggle that bled the German army white. In February 1943, the surrounded German Sixth Army surrendered. It was Hitler's first great land defeat, a turning point from which the German war effort in the East would never recover. In the vast expanse of the Pacific, another decisive battle was fought 6 months after Pearl Harbor. At the Battle of Midway, the U.S. Navy, having cracked Japanese naval codes, ambushed the Japanese fleet. In a stunning victory, American dive bombers sank 4 of Japan's precious aircraft carriers, crippling its naval air power. Midway halted Japan's eastward expansion and put the Allies on the offensive in the Pacific. And on June 6, 1944, the long-awaited Second Front in Europe was finally opened. On D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in France. Under a storm of machine gun fire and artillery, soldiers clawed their way ashore, securing a foothold in Hitler's fortress Europe. D-Day marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. By 1945, Germany was caught in a closing vice. The Allies, having liberated France, pushed from the west, while the colossal Soviet army, having chewed up the German forces in the east, pushed from the other side. German cities were reduced to rubble by a relentless bombing campaign, and its armies were in full retreat. On April 30, 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks from his command post in Berlin, Adolf Hitler died in his bunker. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted just 12. 1 week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over, but in the Pacific, the fighting raged on. Japan refused to give up, vowing to fight to the last man, woman, and child, even as defeat became certain. To avoid a protracted and bloody invasion of the Japanese mainland, which was projected to cost millions of lives on both sides, the United States made a terrible and momentous decision. It decided to use a new, secret weapon of unimaginable power. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped a single atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. In a blinding flash, the city was obliterated. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki with equally devastating results. Faced with this new reality of total annihilation, Japan's leadership was forced to accept the unacceptable. These bombings compelled Japan to surrender. World War II finally came to an end on September 2, 1945. The war was over, but its cost was staggering. It remains the deadliest conflict in human history, claiming the lives of more than 70 million people, the majority of them civilians. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and entire nations were left broken and scarred. But from the ashes of this global catastrophe, the world sought to build a new hope for the future. The United Nations was formed with the aim of preventing such a disaster from ever happening again. The old colonial empires began to collapse, giving way to a new era of self-determination. And a new global order emerged, dominated by the 2 new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cold War. The war changed everything, and its profound and solemn lessons must never be forgotten.